This is a Time Warner Cable community presentation.
The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of either Spectrum Generations or Time Warner Cable. Mature Lifestyle is made possible by Knowlton Hewins Roberts Funeral Homes and Cremation Service. Our homes are warm and welcoming, and we take care of you and your family like we would our own. Call us anytime. We are here for you.
Hello, welcome to Mature Lifestyles. We have some very interesting and important guests today, and they're going to leave a message with you, which I think is very important. It's called, It's Okay to Ask for Help. And I know as we age a little bit, and I'm certainly guilty of that myself, I want to do it myself. I don't want to ask for help, but that's pretty inappropriate, isn't it? Because we have opportunities here. We have Kristen Overton, Chief Operating Officer at Spectrum Generations, but she also deals with Bridges Home Care. And then we have, and I love your title, Ann Foskett. She's a family caregiver and an actress, and I don't know which I want to talk more about. Both, because we are more than what we're talking about. We live full lives and at all phases of life and different things, and it is time sometimes to ask for help. So I'm going to start with you, Kristen. What kind of help can you offer to people who might need some?
Well, Spectrum Generations is the area agency on aging and an aging and disability resource center. And so as that, we provide family caregiver support. We provide aging and disability resources, information and referrals, and through our Bridges Home Care programs, we do help at home, adult day breaks, daycares, and community case management.
We're going to come back to each of those individually because I think many people are trying to help loved ones stay at home, and they need some help with that, and some of these programs are right on point, aren't they? And Ann, I just can't wait to ask you, before I ask you anything about this show, I want to ask you about your actress role.
I've done acting in theaters regionally up and down the East Coast over time, and used to travel quite a bit to do that, and commercials and some film work. But then when my husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I decided I needed to stay home with him.
So you took some time. You were still active at that time, weren't you?
Yes, I remained active in my local community.
Of course.
Yes, I run a river company, which is a small professional theater company, and I'm on the board of Lincoln Theater, so I stay very active in my own community.
But your husband needed help. Tell us about that. What happened?
Well, he obviously started to show signs of not being able to remember things as well as he used to.
It comes on slowly sometimes. It must have been really hard for you.
You're not really aware of what the problem is at first. So then eventually around 2002, he was diagnosed as having some sort of dementia, probably Alzheimer's.
Right.
And we were still able to talk about how he wanted his care to be managed.
Right. So at that point, you were able to talk about it together. You've made a plan.
Well, and really for quite a while, but in the moment he would be able to have a perfectly normal conversation, but 2 minutes later he wouldn't remember anything about it. But yes, we did decide that he wanted to stay at home.
And so for you, that was a huge lifestyle change, I assume. And how about asking for help? Did you know where to go?
Well, not at first. I think at first, like everybody else, I thought I could do it all myself, and I have a lot of friends who...
And so between you and your friends, you thought you could manage.
Kids who were willing to help when they could, and so for quite a while, I didn't reach out, but then realized I needed to.
You needed to. And when she reaches out to groups like yours.
Yes.
And what would she say? She's got a husband that she loves dearly, who's told her he wants to stay at home, got friends and family, a good network, but ouch, it's a huge endeavor and I need help. What do you tell her?
Yes, most people just call and they say exactly that. I need help is what they ask for. And what we tell them is that we're able to connect them with family caregiving groups, support groups, with education classes such as our Savvy Caregiver class, to connect them with actual services that may be able to provide them some respite, some time away to be able to do the things that they enjoy. Most caregivers end up focusing so much on their loved one that they end up making themselves sick as well, and they don't take
care of themselves, right?
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about all those things with you. Did you take care of yourself at first? Was it difficult for you to take the time
Well, I
for yourself?
tried to by staying involved in the things that I enjoy and
Kept your mind
trying to
active
get out,
anyway.
but that became more and more difficult as time went
Exactly.
on. So the first thing I did was to join the Caregivers support group
Okay,
at
why
Spectrum
is that important?
Generations. Well, you with a group of people who are all going through the same experience.
Because you can feel pretty lonely, I suspect.
Yes.
Even though you have family around.
Right, but
you're
they're not doing that every day.
No,
And
you're the one who's there 24/7, and it's your loved one, and you're trying to honor her wishes.
So talking to people who are doing exactly the same, trying to do exactly
Okay.
the same thing.
I want you to talk a little more about it in a minute, but are there these support groups around the state? Now, you live on coastal
Yes,
Maine.
there's
but-
one in Damariscotta.
Okay.
Yes, there's one in each of the counties that we serve.
And
as
so
well
calling
as throughout-
Spectrum Generations, she could have called just the general number, and you would have said, yes, we've got a support group near your home.
Yes, and there's a family caregiver program at all of the area agencies on aging throughout central Maine.
All right.
I mean, throughout all of Maine.
So the network is there, and
Yes.
you shouldn't feel isolated. You can reach out. So
Right.
let's go to this support group. How was it helpful to you? You said they were going through similar experiences.
Yes, that was very important, that everybody was going through the same experience. But then we would find that we'd check in, who's had what problem this week, and very often a problem that one person was having, somebody else was having the same problem. First person had found a solution to that problem, and we could share solutions, or, well, how did you cope with that behavior, or whatever was going on. So we weren't just, it's not just an opportunity to vent, but to help one another.
Problem solve.
Problem solve, absolutely.
Fascinating. That's wonderful. Was your group a large group? You found that many people were going through the same thing.
Oh, it's amazing how many people.
It's shocking, isn't it?
Yes, I think there were 25 people sometimes
Wow.
in the
just-
large group. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Who people were trying to take care of loved ones.
Yes, and not always a spouse. There were
somebody.
children taking care of
Sure.
parents, and
that's a common
some
thing.
husbands taking care of wives, but that's not so common
Not
as
so
wives
common.
taking care of husbands.
Interesting. Now, one of the other things you mentioned was respite care. Did you take advantage of that program?
I did after a while. I wasn't really aware of it at first.
Yes.
And we had one particular gentleman, Larry, who was in our group, who was always saying, now the thing you have to do is make sure you take a vacation. We'd say, how could we do that?
How could you possibly go anywhere, right?
One, how do you
Out to dinner,
organize
maybe.
it? And
Yeah.
two, how could we afford it? And our facilitator for our caregiver group said, well, there are funds available if you apply for them and you're eligible. So there are some funds available. It's not a lot of money, but it does help to get some care to come in so that you can go and take a vacation. And then I discovered that if I wanted to go for a little longer, and I did take a week's vacation at one time, I could take advantage of our local assisted living facilities. If they had
okay.
a room, they would take him for a week, and I knew he was well cared for.
And
The respite care money could go toward that.
So talk about that program a little. It seems very important because that's got to be part of your mental health as well as your
Definitely.
physical health to have that opportunity. And a vacation could be as simple as going out to dinner alone, I would think.
Well, yes, that's
Yes, go ahead,
That's
please.
nice,
Tell me
too.
about that.
Yes, our respite program is for individuals who do have a dementia diagnosis, and it is, as you said, a small amount of money to be able to, and it's for a limited number of people. It is a grant that we receive, and every year, and so we are able to give people it can be spent all at once for, as you said, a vacation. It can be spent 2 hours every other week for someone to go out and get their hair cut. Whatever
Whatever works for that family.
Exactly. It can be used on either hiring a neighbor, hiring an agency, or like you said, assisted living. It's really very flexible.
Depending on the level of care needed, I suppose.
And what works best for that particular
Exactly.
person.
And so that was really important to you, the respite, I would think.
It was, yes.
And then I'm thinking also, we talked a lot about Spectrum Generations, daycare type things. I don't know if you used that program.
I certainly did.
Tell
it was
us about
really a lifesaver for me. Unfortunately, there isn't a Spectrum's Generations daycare program in Damariscotta, but one of our other assisted living facilities
They
has
provide
that. And so on a regular basis, I would take Roger over there, and I knew he would get a good lunch, and he would have some form of entertainment and train people to take care of him if there was an emergency. And so I could get my shopping done.
You get shopping done. Yes. Were you able to use that also to keep going with your acting a little bit? Was it
Well, it's a daytime program.
So not enough time for that, but nevertheless for other important things to you.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about Spectrum Generations Daycare.
Sure. We have 4 different
Is
programs.
Bridges, tell me about, is Bridges that too?
Bridges Home Care is...
That's not the same.
Well, it is.
Okay.
It's all encompassing.
All
Bridges
right.
Home Care is our fee-for-service programs that include home care, so help at home, adult daycares, which we call Adult Daybreak, and our community case management program for people with intellectual disabilities and care management. So we list those all under Bridges Home Care. The funds that we get from that actually goes back into the nonprofit programs that aren't funded enough. So it kind of helps support Meals on Wheels and the Family Caregiver Support Program. And so we have 4 adult daycares. One is in Hollowell, the other is in Waterville, another in Belfast, and then the last is in Skowhegan. And just as you said, it's a daytime program. People can come for 2 hours, they can stay for 8 hours. It's a safe, secure home away from home is what we like to call it. And with nutrition, activities, and socialization.
And your husband's name was Roger, is that right?
Yes.
And did Roger seem to have his spirits a little bit buoyed by being with
Well, I
other
think the nice-
I know he was ill, and
Well, he didn't mind going. Toward the end, he did, because just physically
Didn't
it
feel
was
like
just a lot of work for him to get up and
do
get
anything.
dressed. So we didn't go quite so often near the end of his life as we
Right.
did earlier. But he got to know the people there, and they
Felt
got
comfortable.
to know one another. And actually, through that, the smaller group of caregivers that I'm still involved in, 5 of us from the bigger group whose husbands went to the same daycare, we got to know one another better, and we would do things together that we could
Sure.
include our husbands in, like having dinner at one of our
Isn't that
homes,
wonderful?
because it was to go to a restaurant was difficult, but we all understood their situation, so
You
it was
made your
more
own
comfortable.
parties.
So we made our own parties, and
you're still
now-
friends with them, I
Oh
bet.
yes, absolutely.
So there's a side benefit
There's
that
a
you've made
side
some
benefit.
lifelong friends
Yes,
through this
indeed.
process because
Yes.
you've been through so much together.
We have.
And what did Roger do before he was ill? Was he
Oh,
an
he
actor
was-
also?
No, he wasn't an actor, but he was very involved in
theater.
theater. He was an engineer by training and profession, but he loved to design sets and lights, and
Right.
so that's something we did
And I
together
was-
for many, many
Exactly.
years.
And when you were trying to deal with him, were you able to share a little bit of your outside world with him
Oh,
as
yes,
he was able?
He was always interested in what I was doing. Yes.
Exactly. And so that's an important thing, and I think you both said that earlier. You kept yourself healthy and
I
vibrant.
do think that's
and
very
active.
important, because very often, the caregiver is the one who ends up being more sick than the person that they're
Right,
taking care
because
of.
you are more concerned about him than yourself
Right.
at this point.
Right, and you get too worn out. But it's a balancing act. You have to work at it. And since our little group, since Roger died 2 years ago, and since then, only one of the 5 of us still has a husband at home
Okay.
to be cared for. But now we're widows, so we're a support group in our widowhood.
Right. Well, you're very inspiring and you're very helpful. And stay tuned, because we'll be back with more information about how you too can manage difficult situations and ask for help.
Life should be celebrated. It's a special day when family and friends gather together to celebrate the life of a loved one. A celebration of life helps us honor our loved one and keep our memories alive. Whether you're planning a traditional funeral, a creative celebration of life, or a blend of both, At Knowlton Hewins Roberts, we are truly committed to meet the personal and unique needs of you and your family. Knowlton Hewins Roberts. Visit us online or visit our 2 locations in Augusta and Winthrop.
Spectrum Generations. Live healthy, live well. Get answers, get connected. Spectrum Generations, specializing in the art of aging.
Welcome back to Mature Lifestyles. We're having a wonderful conversation with our guests today, Ann and Kristen. We're talking about a tough topic. We're talking about asking for help when you'd rather do it yourself. When you finally say, nope, help is very important. We're talking with Ann, who's talking about how getting that help helped her honor her late husband's wishes for staying in his home and helped her keep her physical well-being and her sanity, I might add, because it's tough. And I was intrigued by how important you said the networking, the caregivers who went through it with you. And both Krista and I are looking at you with great admiration because you're talking about something that's important to a lot of people. As our population continues to age, we're all facing this, and where do we turn? And we talked about some programs, but one of the things you brought up was how do you pay for those? There are some services that are available. You might tell us about that. And then what about if you run into financial problems? I mean, somebody's got to pay for this wonderful help. How does that work?
Sure. There's several options to have services paid for. People either pay privately for their services if they're lucky enough to have the funds to pay for them. Many people have long-term care insurance policies, which is different from health insurance. Health insurance does not cover sorts of home care and adult day break programs, but long-term care insurance policies will.
Can I ask you a question? Can you buy long-term care insurance after you're already ill?
No.
That's right.
Okay, I mean,
I would
so,
say no,
but
because
the
they
reason,
usually have you take a physical and
I'm just
fill out a lot
thinking
of
you
information.
might want people, if they, we don't want to anticipate this, but you got to think ahead.
Right.
You got to think ahead.
You do.
And so the financial burden could be immense if you've thought ahead and you've bought that kind of policy.
Many people buy it in their 50s or 60s.
Right. So think about it and see if it fits your family's finances and planning for your future.
Right. There are a couple others as well. The Veterans Administration does cover some home care services as well. There's also an aid and attendance benefit that the VA provides to people who are not receiving any other VA assistance. So say they're not receiving any kind of stipend or any kind of retirement.
Okay. So if people can't remember all this, which I wouldn't be able to, they can call Spectrum
They
Generations.
should call our Aging and Disability Resource Centers.
And then you could walk people through what resources are available to them.
Including main care.
Including main care. Lots of options out there. So don't hesitate to call because you think you can't afford it. But there are some ways that you can plan ahead, but you'll advise people, and it's their choice.
And any of the area agencies on aging know
well
that.
schooled in that. They know how to do that. And that's that free telephone number that you can just call up and ask about almost anything that's going to affect you in this area. Did you have long-term care insurance?
We did.
You were very smart.
We bought it previous to Roger being ill, and really for the reason that we didn't want our kids to get stuck having to take care of us in our old age.
There she goes. She doesn't want to ask for help. She's independent, which is good. A nice tribute.
Yes.
So you planned ahead.
It's expensive. So we bought what we could afford to buy, which would not have covered for full-time assisted living, for instance, residential.
Right. But you didn't want that anyway.
No, we knew that was not what we were aiming for. And so we got coverage for home health.
Which was your choice, and there are lots of options out there.
If your doctor says that you need help with the daily living activities, then you're eligible for that. And so we got help for adult daycare and for my home help that came in from Spectrum Generations to help me to dress Roger and bathe him and feed him his breakfast, get him
Because
ready.
that got more difficult,
Yes,
didn't it,
that got more difficult as time went
progressed
on.
in
So
his...
it wasn't until probably the last couple of years that I actually had
Right.
someone coming in a couple of times a week. And she would help me with some of my housework too.
Yes.
So that was very helpful.
Oh, yes. So, Kristen, talk a little bit about the difference in daycare and home health care,
Sure.
because she needed both.
Yes. Daycare is actually a setting where people bring their loved ones. They're safe there. They get meals, they get snacks, socialization, activities. So it's a group of people together who are able, and then the loved ones know that they're safe while they're there. In home care, we actually have a personal support specialist go to the home and then provide one-on-one care with the person at the house. So depending on situations,
And sometimes you need both.
Right.
Sometimes you need both, which you did at the end.
right, sometimes people need someone to come in and get them dressed and bring them to daycare for the day, so that,
Sure.
because daycare really is a very much more affordable option.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. And I think you also talked about at the end of Roger's life, you needed hospice. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and we had hospice through Miles Healthcare, which is our local hospital branch.
Yes.
And they're just wonderful. You get a team of people. They're not there all the time. A lot of people think that once you
They
have
move
hospice,
in with you.
have someone who actually moves in with you. That's not
That's
true.
not true.
You have people coming and going, a nurse and a social worker and several other people if you need them. And a volunteer is usually assigned to you so that they'll come and sit with the person so that you can go out and to a doctor's appointment or
whatever.
a hairdresser appointment or shopping, whatever needs to be done. So it was very helpful, and they were very kind, and it was a very peaceful and sweet ending to
It
his life.
sounded like everything went as the two of you had planned.
It did.
With the support, with lots of support
It did.
by neighbors, friends, family, as well
Absolutely.
as Spectrum Generations and Miles and other
A
groups.
combination
A
of-
combination of it takes a village, doesn't it?
does. It
really
definitely
does.
does.
And so, talk a little bit about how you deal with helping people at the end of life issues like that.
Sure. Spectrum Generations as a whole, we have the caregiver support groups, as we
Right.
spoke of. Our Help at Home program, we can provide care, and we do provide care for people who they may even be having hospice services coming in. Sometimes those hospice services doesn't necessarily mean that that everything's getting done still, and so
So they still need some of the services that you were offering prior to the hospice.
Exactly. There's times where we've had caregivers say to us, instead of me rushing around trying to get a meal together, I wish that I could have just paid someone to go pick up a pizza so that we
Sure.
could just sit with mom. And those are the kinds of things that can help support that hospice.
It's very sensitive. It really does try to help the person deal with what's important.
Right.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that you mentioned in your notes is that you really like to give back to the community. You're doing that now. You're talking
that
bravely
now,
and
yes.
openly about services that were helpful to you and continue to be, but you're helping other people understand what they can do.
I hope so,
And
because
you-
it's there and they should take advantage
And you and
of
Roger really made a major donation to science. Would you like to talk about that for a second?
Yes, I'd love to, because it's such a wonderful program. It was something we were able to talk about when, he was still able to talk about it, that we'd like to do something to advance Alzheimer's research. So I set out looking for a way that we could do that. In fact, one of the social worker from the hospice team helped me to locate the organization. And we ended up working through the Harvard Brain Donation Program. And you have to get it all set up ahead of time, and it's a little bit complicated, but they're very helpful. And it's a free program. The only thing you have to pay for is the brain has to be harvested within a certain number of hours after death. So you have to have it set up with the people who are going to handle the cremation and with a pathologist who will go. They have to know that the pathologist is going to come.
It takes place. It's
and
not
do
just
that.
a last moment decision.
No, you have to have it all set up and all the forms filled out. And then the brain goes to Harvard. They do a full pathology report on it, which you get back, which was interesting in itself because it turned out that it wasn't exactly Alzheimer's that Roger had. It was Parkinson's with a Lewy bodies, dementia, and some other things, which was very informative to his doctor who had been treating him. He got the report too. And then what happens after that is that the tissue from the brain goes to the brain tissue bank, which is operated by Harvard University. And anyone who's doing research on Alzheimer's anywhere in the world can call on that bank to get tissue to work on.
That is extraordinary.
So the joke in our family is that Grandpa always wanted to go to Harvard, and now that's where he is.
Your family sounds extraordinary. I mean, all your thinking and your planning, and to give back to research in such an unselfish way is just extraordinary.
Like
because that takes courage too. Because it's not the normal way of doing it.
You have to think about it, and not everybody would feel comfortable about doing something like that.
But it sounds to you've inspired us also, your relationship with your husband as you talk through all these things. I mean, you were doing this together.
Yes.
Even when he was no longer able to tell you what he wanted to do.
Because we talked about it ahead of time.
Exactly. And that's not easy either.
It's not, but we're both very practical people.
And you're very giving and generous too.
Yes, and we wanted everything to be in place. And
well, you must like your job very much because you get to meet wonderful people like Anne.
Absolutely.
Is there something you want to tell us more about how you got into this? You're very young here to be working with all these needs for elderly people. Do young people also need these caregiving services? They do, don't they?
They do. Yep. We also serve a disabled adult population.
Okay.
I think our youngest patient actually just turned 20.
Wow.
And has cerebral palsy. And so we have a number of people who need other care. So it's not just for people who are older. We also support people who do have disabilities.
That's important to know because it's not limited to age.
Right.
Because if you have those needs and you're the caregiver, that's extraordinarily important. And you know the importance of taking care of the caregiver.
Yes, well, and I think the most important thing to recognize is that you can talk about caregivers, but most people don't recognize that they're a caregiver. They think that a caregiver, there's a specific definition, and really...
A professional.
Right.
Yes.
And
As
that
opposed
really,
to a wife, an actress, a mother.
Exactly. It's anyone who's taking care of someone else is a caregiver. And so I really encourage people to not screen themselves out.
I think that's an important point. And I'm thinking also, if you're the caregiver of this 20-year-old person, you've got a lifetime of caregiving ahead of you.
And a lot of decisions to make.
A lot of decisions to make. And I think one of your lessons was planning ahead as best you can.
As best
when
you
things
can.
are good.
Absolutely.
And that's none of us want
Don't
to
leave it
think
till the
about
last
that.
minute.
Don't leave it until the last minute. But this, you love the person you're caring for, but you have to love yourself.
Yes, and another one of the things that we didn't really mention was the Savvy Caregivers program.
Please, very quickly.
That Spectrum Generations offers. And it is a class, it's a 6-week class, you meet once a week, and they have a facilitator. And it's a more, instead of just general discussion about how did your week go, it's a very specific course on the progression of the dementia, and what to expect, how to handle difficult behaviors and different medications, and it's much more specific.
Yes.
And I took 2 courses of that, and it was absolutely marvelous.
Savvy
Caregivers.
I love the title.
I like that too.
And were there times when you felt a little discouraged when sometimes maybe Roger didn't even know you?
Actually, I was very fortunate in that he always knew who I was.
That was helpful.
And, his face would light up when I walked
we
into the
will
room.
always know who you are, Anne. And Kristen, thank you so much for joining us and explaining what's out there to help these wonderful caregivers, asking for help, and we ask for your help. Thank you very much for joining us on Mature Lifestyle.